Now to take you to Fitzroy in Melbourne, where the opposition leader Bill Shorten is speaking.
Into the neglect and the abuse of people living with disability. Some of the people will speak of their personal experiences, their parents, their advocates. They understand what happens. There's no doubt in my mind that the case for a Royal Commission into preventing abuse and neglect and violence against Australians living with disability is tremendously overdue. Labor called for this Royal Commission on May the 26th, 2017. Now, this country's made some progress on issues of disability. We now have a National Disability Insurance Scheme, for example. But there is unfinished business to ensure that people with disability and their families and carers get an equal go in this country. But there is no more unexamined corner of the life of Australia than the abuse and violence experienced by people with disability. This country has had report after report after report. We know that there are people living with disabilities who are forcibly restrained, as we speak right now. We sadly can predict without any fear of contradiction that there will be people with disability who've been abused and neglected, the victims of violence even in the last 24 hours, even from when the government rejected a Royal Commission on Thursday through to this Saturday morning. Linda's going to speak briefly after me, and then we'll hear if people are willing to talk about some of their stories. But you measure the worth of a society not just by how rich it is or how many gold medals it can win at the Olympics. You measure the worth of our society by the circumstances in which our least advantaged live. A person, an Australian living with a disability, shouldn't be defined by their disability. A disability is just another fact of life. It's part of who you are as a human being. It's the way everyone else responds to that disability is what defines us. There is abuse and neglect and violence going on against people with disability. I sincerely hope that the government reverses its position that it's held for the best part of 2 years against a Royal Commission. I want them to support it. I hope that the government realises the mistake they made on Thursday by voting against a Royal Commission in the Senate. And then I hope the Prime Minister has enough self-reflection to realise he called it wrong on Thursday, when instead of having a vote as to whether or not the Parliament of Australia thinks the people of Australia support a Royal Commission of the lives of people with disability suffering violence and neglect, instead of voting for that measure, which is well overdue, he ran down the clock because he was more worried about appearing that he didn't control the Parliament than doing the right thing. Now, I'm optimistic that this government, realising the public pressure which has materialised, which we were going to do after an election if successful, we now have an opportunity to do this now. So I hope that by Monday, if not before Monday, but by Monday when this matter comes to a vote, the government votes to support a Royal Commission to prevent abuse and neglect against Australians living with disability. I think we can do that even in the dying days of the 45th Parliament. We don't need to wait to an election to say enough is enough, that we don't support the abuse and neglect of our own. And I think a Royal Commission is the best way. It's the king of all inquiries. We can do that, and we can say to people with disability, here's another gap between the inequality and the equality, and we're going to bridge it. I now would like to ask Linda Burney, our shadow spokesperson, to speak, and then some of the lovely, fantastic people here who've never given up on their families and would, just like Parliament, show a little bit of that love that they show every day to the people they love.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bill, for those words. And an enormous thank you and debt of gratitude to the people that have joined us this morning to speak to you about their personal experiences, to talk to you about their children, and to also hear from advocates who have been working in this space for a very long time. People with a disability have waited long enough. They have waited long enough, and the time has come for a Royal Commission into the abuse and neglect and, of course, the violence perpetrated against people with disability. For the people that joined Bill and I this morning, this is not academic. This is their reality every single day. The policy arguments for a Royal Commission are overwhelming. The time has come. We want a broad-based Royal Commission into disability, and the terms of reference, as Labor has committed to for the last 2 years, should be worked out in consultation with the people that understand this issue and the families that live this daily life. This Royal Commission cannot be tacked on to the Aged Care Royal Commission that's taking place at the moment. It must be a stand-alone Royal Commission. And as I said, the terms of reference will be worked out in consultation with the people we have with us this morning. The treatment of people with disability is a national shame in this country. And all of us know someone, whether in our family, within our workspace, within our friends, that would be saying this morning to the government, and particularly to the Prime Minister, the time for this Royal Commission has come. We must give people a powerful voice. And as Bill has said, a Royal Commission is the king of inquiries, and it will give people that join us today and many thousands of people across this country that voice. I am going to invite people to share with you some of their personal experiences. I ask you to take the time to listen to them. This Royal Commission must be broad-ranging. It must cover institutional care and what happens in the daily lives of people. It is critically important that it happen immediately. And as our leader has indicated, we want the government to come on board, to see the need and vote for a Royal Commission on Monday. I'm going to now invite some of our friends with us to have their say. I don't know what order we're going to go in, but who would like to try first?
Where's Peter?
Peter?
Peter? Peter?
Peter? I'll wait there. Mark, did you want to?
Maybe Mark.
Come on.
You're right. Just imagine you talking to people and then.
Yes,
Okay.
you're right. Go for it.
Kevin Stone from Ballard asked me to come along today and tell a little bit of our story, my family's story. Most of my son's story is already in the public domain for people to read. My son's name is Luke and I am his father. Sorry, that's a joke, family joke. And like Anakin,
I did it the right way around.
Well, like Anakin, I too have acted with great passion and fervour for the people that I love, and that's caused me to make mistakes in the past, created some enemies. I could also like to say that now, fortunately for my son, we're in a stage of rebuilding his life, creating a new life for him where he's well supported. Great team of people. The NDIS is providing an adequate level of money to pay for those supports, and my other children are now returning to what they consider was a normal life. It's only 2 years ago they started to say that. My son is 30, so that's a long time that my other children have suffered.
So what happened to him?
And my son has severe autism and a long and very sad history of traumatic events and challenging behaviours. From a very, very early age, we believe that he was abused right through his young childhood years by various people, and some of whom started out meaning well but ended up being trapped in a system that didn't let them care the way they wanted to, with my son reacting to events that had happened to him prior. And I suppose I've said it a little bit more than I wanted to say. The main reason I'm in support of a Royal Commission is we need to make the truth plain for people to see so that we can work with it. And the main point from my perspective is my son's got great supports. He lives really well today, but every other day he will have a memory. And being autistic, he doesn't just remember those traumatic events where people abused him. He suffers the same emotions. His brain reacts, it recreates those emotions, and he actually tries to replay those events on himself and on other people, even today. And that is the consequence of abuse of a child at a young age can live through a person's life until they die.
Mark,
and
just
aim to stop it.
Describe what happened with the piece of wood.
Oh, crumbs.
You need to go there.
Look, I wish you were the Prime Minister because I'd need your permission.
You don't need anyone's
If you can't go there, don't know. But
I will, and I'm going to take longer than perhaps you want to cut
Yeah,
down.
just-
But I had to apologise to this lady here. I've forgotten your name. Deborah, because she told the story about her son who's at school, a young child at school. I had to go and apologise to her because we had the chance as a family to take the state to court and to seek justice for my son, to uncover all the abuse that happened to him. But after all of the hearings that we went through that ended up in the High Court of Australia, we decided to forgive those who'd abused my son. A very difficult thing for a father to do, to forgive on behalf of your son, only to find that he still lives with those memories, and my workers still have to deal with the consequences of that. And families are still suffering in exactly the same way. I now wish that we'd actually pursued it through to completion, and I hope that the Commission will do that instead without causing all the trouble.
Just don't be too hard on yourself.
Anyway, I probably said too much.
No, you've been fabulous.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Gottlieb from Children and Young People with Disability Australia. I just wanted to follow on from Mark's comments, and also Deborah, I think, who will speak shortly soon, is what I see commonly, or it's commonplace for children and young people to experience abuse and violence throughout their childhood. That can't go on. I hear daily of incidents of real concern, you know, from kids being pinned to the ground, from kids being in restraint and seclusion at school, for kids being bullied. We've got around 60% of kids being bullied at the moment. You know, that's at school. That is just not okay. And when I say bullying, I don't mean name calling. I mean serious physical assaults, rocks thrown at them, food thrown at them. We have to stop. This can't be the typical experience for children and young people with disability in Australia. We've heard today very strongly that that has lifelong consequences, and it's got to stop. And the sooner we have a Royal Commission, the better. Thank you.
Anyone else like to say something?
Peter? Peter?
Come on, darling. Off you go. You want something?
Relatively speaking, I got generally lucky with my experiences as a child with disability. Although I did have moments of in my first high school of being called names, punched in the guts, and one case of sexual harassment. I even told the principal of that first high school that I did not feel safe, but yet it took 4 years for me to do for something to happen that was to my satisfaction, and that meant going to another school. And hearing these stories again and again just makes me it's just heart-crushing to hear all these tales of abuse and I just want to know why this keeps happening, why people think they're allowed to get away with it. This is why we need a Royal Commission to put a stop to all of this.
Good on you, darling.
Peter?
Yes, hello, my name is Peter Curott. I'm the father of Alexander Curott, and this is Alexander's mum and my wife, Paula Curott. Alexander is 33 years old, and he has been in care since he was 11 because he had pretty intense behaviour difficulties, but he'd sustained no injuries of any note with us while he was living with us, with a family of 3 younger children. But there were substantial issues that forced us to seek respite care for him. 22 years later, he was still in state care in a concrete house. We've advocated very hard for him all the way through. His body bears witness to his life. He has scars all over his body. He cannot walk. He has hemiplegia. He's been suffocated under a blanket. We have medical scans that indicate that he has a hypoxic brain injury. He's also had a subdural hematoma from endlessly beating his own head on the floor of an unpadded house. He's been sexually abused. That's case number 38 that the Royal Commission heard before Justice Buchanan on the 22nd of March 2016. He's been disrespected in so many ways. He's no longer there. On the 25th of October, which was a Thursday at lunchtime last year, we drove to Alexander's house, which was a Disability Accommodation Services unit at Plenty Residential Services, and we, as his guardians, parents and administrators, we removed him, put him in our old car, and we drove him home. The reason we did that is that on the 16th of October he'd sustained injuries, and these injuries were photographed 3 days later in a dental hospital where he had a planned procedure which we had medically cleared, so it still happened. And you will see that he's under the effect of anaesthetic, so we could get a good photo. So that bruise was extensive, and there's also significant tissue damage and a distal fracture of the left clavicle. He returned after the surgery to the unit. I worked in there for a while. I'm trained in those areas. Unpaid, I worked because I had authority to give him the medication that he required. Then I melted away and just kept regular contact. On the Thursday morning of the 25th, these happened on the 16th of October, sorry. On the Thursday morning, we heard that he was bleeding from his right eye. That's after he was cleaned up. We went straight to the house, put him in the car, and as my wife and I tried to keep him calm, a young man that was working with him under our employ dabbed the blood that was running down his right cheek. He's now 115 days away from that situation. He's living in an apartment hotel in your electorate, I think, Bill. And he needs a home. He'll never return to where he was. He's actually asked me to talk to Bill Shorten. I think I've done that now. Alexander's a lovely person, but he can't walk. He couldn't walk from here to that cameraman without falling over. When he was with us, he could run like the wind. So many things have happened. We almost can't believe this has happened to him, but we now realise this happens to lots of people. So we just say again to the people of Australia and their elected representatives, let's go right for it. Let's get a royal commission, a separate royal commission into violence and abuse and neglect of people with disability in Australia. They live under the same sun. They breathe the same air. They are Australians, and I thank you.
Hi, I am the very proud parent of a child with a disability. And recently my son, it became evident that he was abused at his special school. This began at the age of 4, where he was put in a tent in a cupboard. Then recently he was restrained, forcefully restrained, tied down with rope and put in a confined space. He has countless times been pulled around by his limbs and also he's been isolated from other students on a daily basis. So this is basically assaulted, imprisoned falsely, and dehumanised, dumbed down with little to no education. This is a child who is teachable, a child who is manageable with the right professional supports, and a child who is celebrated by his family and treated as an equal. So this should not be happening. I fear that this is a lot bigger than the school environment. It's systemic in the community, and the longer that there's a hold on this Royal Commission, every day another child or adult is abused with a disability. So this is just, enough is enough, basically. These people in the community deserve to be treated as equals. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to say something before we wrap up?
Yep.
Come on, love.
I'm Heather Forsyth. I am a person with an intellectual disability. 46 years ago, I was abused by a family member, and I'm still to this day finding it very hard to talk about. But with the support of my colleagues at work, we are doing a Staying Safe project where we are telling people out there it's not okay, it's okay to complain.
Hello, I'm Bronwyn Morecambe. I'm the Young People in Nursing Homes Alliance National Director. The only thing I'd like to add to what's already been said is that we need a separate Royal Commission. We do not want to see a Royal Commission tacked on to the existing Aged Care Royal Commission. Young people enter nursing homes, but they have disabilities before they go into nursing homes, and we need to be looking at what happens to people with a disability broadly. Thank you.
My name's Kevin Stone. I'm Chair of Inclusion Australia. How can you not vote for a Royal Commission? How can you say you're not interested in finding the truth? I can't believe it. We issued the call 7 years ago for a standalone Royal Commission into abuse and neglect. This stuff continues to happen. The NDIS is welcome in the sense that it is improving the service system in response to people with disabilities. But you actually don't heal unless you expose, unless you rip that Band-Aid off and let the air in. And for many people with disability and families, these atrocities are a daily occurrence across the country. People are abused sexually, physically, financially. They're ripped off in all sorts of ways. They're bullied. Every day my organisation, Valid in Victoria, deals with new incidents, new complaints of abuse. One currently, for instance, where a staff member has reportedly held a person down and burnt them with an iron, a hot iron. Another case where a person with disability was basically kicked to the ground and dragged along the carpet. These things happen every day in this country, and until we actually get to the truth and expose that truth, we're not going to improve this system at all. The NDIS will never make a difference in the lives of people with disability unless we expose these truths. So we support and reiterate our strong call for an independent standalone Royal Commission, and we commend Bill, the Labor Party, on standing with us. Thank you.
Ross Joyce, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Federation of Disability Organisations. We're a national peak body. We have members right across the country, and we stand firmly behind an independent Royal Commission. And us and all of our colleagues across the advocacy sector are really keen to see this get ahead and be started. We're very tired of the wait, and I think today you got what I would consider just a tip of the iceberg of the things that are going on out there, from real people standing here telling you what's happened in their situation. And I think it's appalling that it continues to be dragged on. But I also want to congratulate Bill, Linda and the ALP for their strong commitment. We were here in 2017. Bill made a commitment to us that there is going to be a Royal Commission. Yeah. I know he's been fighting hard along with his team to get that through. And I'd also like to mention also the Greens and Senator Jordan Steele-John doing a fantastic job of also working on that and pushing that through. And that's because they understand the issues that are out there, the issues that are happening every day. We're tired of it. Prime Minister, we want you to just do it. You've got a chance to do it now, please.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I thank everyone, and I appreciate the journalists here letting people tell their story. You can sense that for a long time people have had stories to tell, but there's not enough people listening.
Some really harrowing stories there, but politically we had opposition leader Bill Shorten and spokeswoman Linda Burney speaking there in Melbourne. They've been calling for a Royal Commission into the disability sector as part of an attempt to stop abuse and also increase transparency in the industry. Now,